Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel where we break down complex legal cases and concepts to make them easier to understand. Today we have an intriguing Singapore High Court case to discuss. It's the 2024 case of DPP and Jill. This case involves allegations of molestation, the use of electronic evidence, and interesting discussions about the presumptions of electronic records. The case, DPP and Jill, involves an appeal by Jill, who was convicted of molesting a 12-year-old girl. Jill was charged under Section 3542 of the Penal Code, which addresses an outrage of modesty involving a minor. He was sentenced to 23 months imprisonment and 3 strokes of the cane. The key elements of the case revolve around the allegations of molestation during a sleepover and the defendant's appeal against the conviction, arguing against the district judge findings and reliance on certain pieces of evidence. So let's dive into what exactly happened here. The defendant, Jill, was accused of molesting the victim during a sleepover at his house. The victim was at his house for a sleepover with Jill's daughter, who was 8 years old at the time. During the sleepover, the victim alleged that Jill touched her thigh and vagina area while they were sitting on the top bunk of a bunk bed. The case hinges on several key points of evidence, including testimony from the victim, corroborating accounts from others, and data from Jill's smartwatch. The smartwatch, an Amazfit GT, was used by the defense to argue that Jill was in deep sleep at the time the alleged incident occurred. However, as we'll see, this evidence wasn't as straightforward as it might seem. Let's start by summarizing what happened in the lower court. The district judge noted that the victim's testimony was unusually convincing, noting that although there were some inconsistencies in her evidence, these were minor and did not affect her overall credibility. The victim had also informed her friend and her mother about the incident shortly after it happened, and these reports were seen as a contemporaneous corroboration of her claims. The watch data that Jill relied on was admitted into evidence, but was not considered reliable enough to raise reasonable doubt, given that the expert forensic consultant could not verify its accuracy. Now let's talk about the appeal. Jill argued that the district judge made errors in assessing the smartwatch data and the inconsistencies in the victim's testimony. He relied on Section 116A of the Evidence Act, which deals with presumptions in relation to electronic records. Jill argued that the court should have presumed the smartwatch data to be accurate, given that electronic records are presumed authentic under certain conditions. But here's where it gets interesting. The High Court found that Jill's reliance on Section 116A of the Evidence Act was misplaced. The presumption under Section 116A is meant to facilitate the admission of electronic records, not to establish their accuracy once the evidence has been admitted. Essentially, it helps get the evidence into the courtroom, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the content of that evidence is automatically true. The High Court emphasized that there was no evidence presented to show the reliability of the smartwatch data. For example, how did the watch determine whether Jill was in deep sleep or in a light sleep? Without any technical validation of the data's accuracy, the district judge was right in deciding not to rely on it. Even if the data was accurate, it could only prove that Jill might have been in deep sleep, but not that the alleged act didn't happen at all. It was entirely possible that the victim got the timing slightly wrong. The High Court also addressed the various inconsistencies in the victim's evidence, which Jill argued should have cast reasonable doubt on her testimony. Now, it is important to understand that inconsistencies are common in witness testimonies, especially in sensitive cases involving minors. The High Court found that these inconsistencies were not material to the core allegations that Jill touched the victim inappropriately. For instance, whether the victim described the motion of Jill's hand as circular or linear didn't change the fact that she was consistent about being touched in an intimate area. Ultimately, the High Court upheld the conviction. It found that the district judge had not erred in finding the victim's testimony credible. The victim was consistent on key points: who molested her, where the molestation took place, and the sequence of actions. This consistency, combined with the corroboration from her friend and mother, was enough for the High Court to find that the prosecution had proven its case beyond a reasonable doubt. So what does this case tell us about the use of electronic evidence in criminal trials? One takeaway is that while electronic devices like smartwatches can provide valuable information, the data they generate isn't automatically conclusive. Courts still require proof of how reliable that data is, especially when it's used to establish an alibi or disprove an accusation. Another key point is the approach to inconsistencies in witness testimonies. In sexual offense cases, especially those involving minors, courts are often mindful that trauma can impact memory and the ability to recount events with perfect consistency. In this case, the High Court took a nuanced approach, recognizing the significance of the victim's emotional distress and corroboration by third parties. Thanks for sticking with me through this case breakdown. Until next time, stay informed and stay curious.